fellow colleagues. I'm Ann Borda, and I am your chair today, coming from Melbourne, and very pleased to invite you to listen to this set of presentations around technology design in citizen science projects. We have a very international group from Europe, from Australia, so a bit of north, a bit of south. And I'm very excited to start our set of presentations on citizen science and technology for healthy living in future sustainable cities, which will be presented by Martin Serrano and Achille Zappa from the Data Science Institute. Just to say that this first set of presentations will transition from Martin to Achille, and we're looking at around 40 minutes for their combined presentations, and we'll be taking questions afterwards. But we encourage you, please, to put the questions in the chat, and then we will have a better opportunity for them to have those questions put together for them to respond to. So thank you very much, and I will start now with Martin from the Data Science Institute. And Martin, please correct me, but you are from the National University of Ireland in Galway, and looking very much forward to our first speaker. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Anne. And yes, I confirm I'm working for the National University of Ireland. We're in a research institute, which is associated to the university, and it's physically in Galway City. So I share my screen now with the slides, and you can see here, the first part of this presentation will be basically a sort of a quick explanation on what we are doing in terms of our citizen science, because obviously the conference is the main topic. We are based in this COVID situation, but still working from home. My background very quickly has been changing from industry towards research, and then I have been working in several topics in terms of data analytics, in terms of data processing, and lately in the Internet of Things, which is more like producing data, collecting the data, and then sharing this data to multiple systems and platforms. We have a vision in the lab, in our institute, we are able to share data amongst different systems and subsystems, and obviously people is the most important aspect on this one. This fits into the healthcare and well-being, because obviously we are monitoring, we are collecting data from people towards this healthcare. And more or less, this is the data flow that we follow. So we have data from devices, either private or public devices. We have some monitorization, some remote monitorization, and also we have some sort of specific data formats and annotation. We use this for assistant living, for in our concept of living lab, and then we have some applications towards elderly people or caregivers or even parents that are worried about these people. Obviously, in this kind of a living architecture, so we have the opportunities in our lab to work with sensors, to work with some platforms, call it gateways, with some middleware platform, which is software that runs on the cloud, runs on computing servers, but also we have applications that demonstrate and engage with the users. And here is when we rely on, we require support from people, citizens. And of course, because we want to do this in a scientific way, we use the concept of citizen science. Now, in terms of citizen science, we have been outdoor, and we have released or have implemented some sort of a smart building and a smart city approach to convince the people that there is value on their data, on the data that they produce. This is in the context of an environmental monitoring unit. It's a kind of a tracking environmental unit with multiple sensors, multiple weather stations, multiple gas sensors to monitor the conditions on the air and the conditions on the weather. So this has been tested somehow in the lab, outdoor. When it becomes to be more popular, we went to some kind of exhibition areas, and the next phase was to have in schools and universities. And this is the kind of the situation when we are at the moment with this mobile unit. We also have obviously other projects in terms of smart technologies for cities, like traffic conditions monitoring systems. We have also what we call the platforms for cities, OpenIoT, Vital, Fiesta, and also we have the monitorization of these systems in a remote environment. like you can see on the Living Labs pilots. And of course, because our institute is based on data analytics, of course, we do visualizations, we do analytics on the data. When it comes to personalization and cities, so we need to talk about sustainable cities. So people are concerned, and we are everybody concerned about the sustainability of the cities in terms of green, in terms of reducing carbon footprints, in terms of optimizing smart industries, and of course, the human-centric approach in terms of our data utilization. And here is when we go into these sustainable activities. In Ireland, we have a very active government working since 2016, producing sustainable documents based on the sustainable goal SDGs. And also we have what we call the index to measure these sustainable goal developments. Of course, we are not only in Ireland, we go outside, and we have been also participating in international events like COP25 last year. Of course, this is just a very short introduction about what we do in citizen science to make you aware, to make you interested, and if you want to work with us or participate with us, just join our team and contact us to do this one. Now, let's start with the topic of today. So, citizen science obviously implies different observations, different questioning, planning, analyzing, and communicating towards people. In order to facilitate the collection, the participation, obviously the collaboration, to create and connect, obviously, the different aspects of the data towards the science. We need to understand, we need to empower people to allow to do that via technologies. And here is when the science and technology comes together. So we have some kind of identification of characteristics that citizen science can rely on to be successful. And of course, the most important is on the top, engagement of citizens. Without citizens, we don't have any value. But it implies good communication. We have to go to rely in contributions to science. We have to expand what we call the libraries or scientific libraries, whatever is the area. If it's biology, if it's computer science, this needs to be expanded because this is the value of citizen science. You can see it's kind of the foundation of the engagement. And then we have a specific clear goals, and then data which is reliable. These are kind of the characteristics to define what we call successful citizen science exercise. But we have done beyond that and define a participatory process. And here is when we are going to show today some examples, and Achille will expand specifically how we have used this process in our projects, in our experiments. So the three pillars of science, as you might know already, citizen science, is science, citizens, and socioeconomic. And of course, we have a big specific challenge, which is a problem formulation towards citizens. You see, science and citizens needs to be together towards this problem formulation. Obviously, the idea of the goal of this formulation is to have awareness and participation to influence or to get what we call the engagement and the contribution as an activity. Obviously, this is just the process as we have identified, we have defined, and there is kind of activities, collateral activities that are joining this process. Obviously, the collaboration, the understanding, the participation of the citizens, the empowerment, and of course, the creation of some sort of regulations or policies. So all this one is what we call the participatory process on citizen science in order to have impact, in order to have good results. Now, Achille will focus on this right side because when we go into cities, specifically smart cities, we have what we call the misunderstanding of the citizens because they might not understand technology. So we have to engage with them in a very clear problem formulation by involving methodologies like co-design, by involving obviously the perception and the mapping of the ideas, because we cannot talk scientifically, we cannot talk technology with people, we might talk only high-level descriptions. And then we get this data out of this collaboration, and then we do this one in a very iterative cycles, because sometimes we have data that is not really the type of data that we want. This will be more in details from Achille presentation, but I just wanted to highlight what exactly is what we are looking for to explain today. So in this ecosystem of citizen science, we have created a sibling, let's say, a association, which is citizenscience.ie, is the version of Ireland citizen science. When we have projects to run towards these initiatives. So we already have an international project which is called CarePit, when we look at the different characteristics of the carbon production. and then participatory or participants collaborate and give this data. And we have the environmental monitoring unit, as you already saw, as another project. We also have what we call the Activate project, and I briefly will go towards what this Activate project is about and how we engage with citizens to collaborate and to engage towards the production of data. So Activate comes from activating innovative smart city, smart living environments for aging well. And a smart environment could be a city, could be a house, could be a building, could be a residence. But in this context, we will just show exactly what is this all about. My acknowledge to our pilot leader, which is the Pilar Sala. So she has been working with us and leading all these deployments and engaging with the citizens, and this is the most important part of citizen science. And the achievement on here is that we are a multi-centric project. So we have large-scale pilots. So we have around 70 partners, 46 partners and 70 locations. Then we have what we call the activation of these aging ecosystems. So the idea is here is that the more active is the people when we are aging, more healthy we rely on. Of course, we use technologies to monitorize and incentivize this activity. So you can see it's a pan-European project, all the places in Europe, almost all the places. So we have deployment sites, what we call is locations, DS. We have a kind of a good number of users, target users, up to 7,200 users. Those are the citizens, essentially. And then we have what we call the elderly users and the carers, so different stakeholders in these users. The idea is to have technologies that are going to be installed or will be wearables. And then in these 9 locations, we will have selected specific technologies to rely on different use cases. So from housing monitorization, from transport mobility, from behaviors analysis, from age-related changes, disease management, social engagement, assisting technologies, all of them are the areas that the citizens will engage and participate according to the different deployment sites. Now, you can be questioning, what are the benefits of engaging with elderly people and citizens? Of course, the benefits is to test and prove these technologies, use cases, and get feedback to improve the technologies. We are always talking about research. We are talking about innovation. So we are talking always needed this feedback to improve the technology and satisfy the goals. So as a very quick snapshot, we have these locations, Galicia in Spain, Valencia in Spain as well, the east. We have also Madrid, which is the capital. We have Emilia-Romagna region in Italy. So we have the Greek deployment site. We have in France as well. So we have in Wocas in Germany. We have Leeds in UK, and we have also Finland in Turku. So very, very good locations for different type of use cases. And from preventing mental declination or illness to more kind of an indoors location monitorization, or even promoting the mindfulness of the brain, or even just protect and promote connections socially. So when we are aging, so we need all these applications or all these uses. So we have reference use cases and we have AHA applications, or we call active and healthy aging domain, AHA. And then this is kind of a good summary on the citizens' participation that is involving or is implicit in this project. So from Galway, from Galicia, we have 2,474 people already engaged. In Valencia, we have 1,500 up. So we have 800 in Madrid. So we have around 167 in RARE. So we have in Greece 1,240, and in France we have 130. You see, those are samples according to different cities, right? So I will speed up a little bit, and then we have these locations, this type of locations. You can see here different private homes, shared rooms, and personal space and smart cities. So basically, this is a good kind of a introduction for you to know what we have done in terms of engagement, in terms of participation. And Achille will give from now a more detailed approach in terms of the methodology that I explained in the beginning in terms of engagement and participation. Thank you, and please make your questions on the chat and I will be willing to answer in the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. That's a very exciting range of projects which you described. While we're waiting for the transition to Achille, Achille is also from the Data Science Institute at the National University of Ireland, Galway. And may I ask attendees to continue to post questions so that we can address them at the end of Achille's presentation, as they are both linked, Martin's and Achille's talk. Thank you very much, Achille. I'm happy for you to start. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Achille Zappa. I'm from the National University of Galway in Ireland and also Data Science Institute. I will talk a little more about the enabling the Internet of Things and active healthy aging European ecosystem. I will take on the more by the experience that we had with the large-scale pilot Active Age that is one of the Age 2020 big pilot project that is focused on the setting the grounds for the better quality of life using IoT technology. And this is aimed toward a very standard, secure, and interoperative AHA IoT ecosystem that is going to enable new business model, cost-effectiveness solution for active and healthy aging. And this is going to be contributing the sustainability of the healthcare system, the citizen, the elderly people, and especially it's the very focus in the improvement of the quality of life and the autonomy of the older in the former independent life. So you can see what is going to be the ecosystem view of the project that was created, and you see that there is a very heterogeneous connection of different entities or organizations to be able to really cover all the spectrum of the value chain that is necessary to really be able to ground the technology, but also the interaction with people at European level. We are working with SME industries, big company, research entities, public entity, municipality, academia, and of course with the real end user, that is thousands of citizens that is participating in our experiment that are using our technology to improve their quality of life, and also that are using to understand what we need to do better for them, and learn all the lessons that are necessary to improve the technology to be able to improve the quality of life. We are part in 11 countries, and we have now 12 deployment sites. The deployment sites are very complex and need to really represent the European reality in a wide range of social model, especially because we target older population with goal of extending independent life, informal and formal caregivers, different type of potential business model, and mixed participation of public and private services. And at the core of the project and the experiment are all the IoT solutions that are implemented in different but interoperable ways. This all technology are based on a core set of suite platform and modular software, but at the end are going to be part of the life of these population, citizen, and elderly people through AHA IoT services that cover different type of solution. And we cover principally 11 reference use cases. And we offer the citizen, the caregiver, the doctor, the patient, and the elderly the at least 32 AHA application. And as you can see, we need to be sure to cover all the value chain of the AHA IoT ecosystem, and from the supply side to the demand side. And this is the essential to be able to have a real groundbreaking solution that is going to be applied at the European level, but also at the regional level, municipality level. And we needed to have the cooperation of device provider, network provider, platform application, but also service provider on the side, real customers, society, municipality, and different other stakeholders. As you can see in a simple, very simple example here of one solution in one deployment site, there are different interaction that are very dependent on the technological side. But one of the main focus is the interaction and ability to work with the real end users, with the population, the citizen, to be able to give them the application to monitor, to improve their life, but also to gain all the feedback and from the end users. This is because the very objective is evidence creation, and the evidence creation strategies is to generate real evidence of the AHA IoT ecosystem impact at the European level, starting from the local evidence result. And one of the main, as you see, the primary endpoint is the quality of life. And for sure, all the other evidence impact are related to the innovation and growth and the sustainability of all this ecosystem and reality. So even if the basic of the project and the very core goal is the software solution, the IoT solution, and the technological innovation, we need to remember that we are dealing with a real population. We are involving with a citizen, so involve the user. It's a basic user-centered design, because it's a user-centered design methodology that is proposing has been applied at a certain point by all the deployment site, even before the participation in the project, because we needed to start with some common ground and common understanding and network. This type of methodology allows the user to test all the different type of solution, and the extension of the feedback on the usability and other type of feature, and the application of all this feedback to really going back and implement the different improvement by all the technical team and the solution. As you can see, we have a very large pool of stakeholder and user involved. in the project. If you can see, as also Martina showed before, we have almost 7,000 people that are involved in the experiment, that are using our technology, and that are going to be part of the evaluation of the process. As you can see, we need to use different tools and KPI to understand exactly not only if the software is working or the device is working, but also what is the impact in the life of the people and the improvement of the quality of life. So as you can see, there are different ways to cover the different part of the feedback, but mainly we need to have an interaction between the technical part, component, the business part, and the end user via questionnaires that are used to collect different type of measurement and quality and quantitative values, and we use different type of also form that are standardized and used in European Commission to collect the end user information. And all this experiment and effort are at the end very useful to be able to create not only a better software and hardware solution, but also to understand and learn what are the lessons from the experience and create guidelines that are improving the interaction, for example, user engagement, the evaluation, the experiment setup, the interfaces, and also give us the opportunity to scale up the project. And all these guideline experience naturally are better if they are in any case shared and have a common view. And also let's see that it's important to try to have a certain type of strategy for the standardization of activities. You can see that we try to have a three-level strategy, and it's basically divided from three main internal steps that are from the transformation, use, manipulation, analysis, and of data and practices and information from the physical world to data itself, because we are talking about real information that are derived from the installation, the IoT system in the smart city, in a region, in a real application in houses. So from the data, we pass to this data management and quality support to the data exchange, and from the data to the transferring to the best practice. But one of the other strategy that was used to grow and enlarge was the use of open call inside the project. That was one of the main effort that was able to ignite the market growth and the sustainability of the IoT ecosystem, attracting new stakeholders on top of the one that we already had. In this case, it was based on two open call, with the one that is more related to the first phase with new SME technology provider entrepreneurs to really create, understand, and extend new features and new use cases, new application to attract also new end user and be able to test the payment site ecosystem with new services and new citizens. And the second was to grow more in a scale up way. That's why we created 3 new deployment site pilot from the 9 that were the original one. So we extended from the one that was showed by Martin to new deployment site in Bulgaria, in Sofia, in Portugal, Lisbon, and in Catalonia. In this way, we were able to implement also new solution, extend our ecosystem, involve a new citizen, new region, new reality, and try to use the core technologies of the active age with new partners and new devices to understand that the reality in a different region, try to validate and improve via the experience and the interaction with this new ecosystem. And one of the way that we use obviously to integrate, to understand what is the need of the population, what to extend the use of co-creation activities, workshop, training services that was done to interact, to improve, and to teach not only the elderly people on how to use the technology, devices, application, but also the way to give them the possibility to give a feedback, a comment, improve the solution, and also to teach the caregiver, the healthcare system, how to use all this software and application in the best way for the citizen and for them. And so this view approach to sustainability that is define a plan in 3 very focused perspective on the continuation, that is continuation of the services, the users, the deployment site, the scaling up to try to improve, enhance, and add new services, new users, and the replication that is on new services and location. And we need to understand that, okay, there was, in this case, also during the pandemic, there was some hiccup during the fact of the lockdown, because the elderly people were not able to interact with the technician. So you can see that there are some part that could be improved from a technical point of view, but there is also something that is interesting, because this IoT AHA services application was able also to give a better sense of monitoring in remote the elderly people and caregiver. but I think that I can stop here. Thank you very much. And
thank you very much, Achille. That was a very detailed view of these large-scale IoT projects that you and Martin are undertaking. We have a number of questions, and if Martin can also come into the broadcast, wonderful. I might start with a later question because it's from an audience member who says that they missed the introduction but would like to know a little bit more about the disciplines that make up your team. What type of expertise do you have within the project? And I think this is really around also understanding a bit more about the user experience and which can be evaluated from various diverse perspectives. So it's a bit of a question to unpack a bit. But if we could start with perhaps you telling us a bit more about your background and the team.
Yeah, I can take it and maybe pass to Achille to complement. Definitely, it's a multidisciplinary team. You can imagine from Red Cross. I mean, Red Cross is there, so they are completely nursing people, and they are not totally aware of the technologies. And we have scientists from the technology side, from emerging technologies like IoT, big data, AI. So we have also industries, large industries like Samsung devices from the UK. So we have research institutes from Greece, from France, from Spain, from Ireland. It's a very, very complex project from the sense that there is a bit different backgrounds, but it's very interesting as well because we have learned a lot on different languages and in terms of vocabularies, right? We have expanded this one to the technology side, and this is when we were to the point of user experience. We were hitting the wall many times trying to convince people to use our technologies, and because they are not really market technologies, so we really need to use some technologies or some kind of methods. And we came across citizen science as a methodology towards engaging with citizens, and that was what Achille was explaining to you in terms of how we approach them, how we show them the technology, and how we convince them to be participatory in that. Maybe just underline on this approach. So the difference from non-using citizen science approach and using citizen science is that the openness of the data, the availability of providing this data as a feedback to us was announced to them. In a normal project, what we do is just engage with people, we process the data, we make our own conclusions from a scientific perspective, from a technological perspective, and we improve the technology. In ActiveAge, after several approaches, several attempts, we are convinced now that citizen science can help to create awareness and more engagement. At the same time, the participatory aspect of the people will be more positive because they know they are contributing to a bigger change, to a bigger impact. Achille, do you want to add something in relation to participation and user experience?
No, maybe, I don't know. It's okay. Just give time. Maybe you want to tell more. Maybe the question was also on the team of the university.
Yes, that's right. And I think part of the question that Martin answered was also who are you considering as the user and the receiver, the distinctions maybe across those two as well.
Right. Yeah, so what it corresponds to our team in the university. So my background, my first degree was electronics engineer, and then I kind of get tired of doing electronics and circuit design, and I moved to computer science to get a degree on computer science and PhD. So I kind of have a tendency to engage different disciplines in our team, electronic engineers, software programmers, also obviously policymakers. Just to give an idea, one of the members of my team is the ex-mayor of Galway. So he moves from the city policy making towards more research-oriented aspects in the times, and it's a very, very open environment for doing research and collaborations. Achille is bioengineering by profession, and he's now doing data science. And you see, it's kind of a multidisciplinary team that give us also the opportunity to understand different aspects, different processes in the applications. I feel proud that the multidisciplinary approach has helped us to have a bigger scope. There are some limitations, of course, because the training time, the adaptation process for each individual is a bit longer. But with the experience that we have already in the institute, so we have a good trajectory of success stories and engaging with people when they come to us. I have already provided my contact details if you are interested either to join us, to participate, or to to collaborate. Just contact us. Feel free.
So I'll move on to another question that came up in Martin's talk, and that was about describing more about your work regarding the living labs. So I suspect that would mean, your relationship both to the university industry and also to, participants themselves. How is that set up, and how does that work?
Yeah, thanks for that question, because that gives me the opportunity to talk about and extend the message. So essentially, Living Labs is a real environment. It's an outdoor space that starts in our labs, start in our control space, and then we want to experiment this one outdoor. So obviously, you can imagine immediately the best scenario is smart cities. So when we talk about monitorization, about the conditions of the weather, when we talk about sensing capabilities, so having it in a small room is good because we can test the technology, but having it in an open space will give us more variables to control. And we have created collaborations with the city municipality, Galway City Council. We have created collaborations with industries that allow us to go outside with their own kind of ecosystems. And to the point that we have now a kind of an organization or an initiative called Open Agile Smart Cities as an instrument to test our technologies outdoor. So we have achieved to convince the industries, SMEs, and municipalities to collaborate with us by facilitating the infrastructures, by facilitating the data, by facilitating the access, as simple as that. And then we test our technologies in a control process, but outdoor. And this is what we call living labs. So it's kind of a well-known term in smart cities. We are using this term as well in ActiveAge to kind of convince people that they are part of a bigger activities. And that's it. I mean, this is a concept that we are implementing towards the cities. We also have kind of rooms, sensorized rooms. We also have kind of spaces that we test technologies, but this is more like traditional approach of a lab, right? But a living lab is when we produce the data, when we go outside and we test beyond the room, the walls, the technology. Yeah.
So there were a few other questions that came between your talk and Achilles, and I'm just finding them now. But again, it was really around collaboration and the Internet of Things community. But one question, which is drawing out again a bit about your environment, is it says, interesting project, Martin. However, it sounds like a rather classic mHealth project, using citizens as testers and feedback givers on technology. What do you feel is the citizen science characteristic in this? And if you could answer that in about a minute, because we will be transitioning to the next session.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's definitely the design of this project was in the face of healthcare and well-being. So that was the origins of this idea. Nevertheless, we never kind of compromised from the beginning the stakeholders. So we just have a target and indicated around 7,000 stakeholders. It was until we start to run the project and we create these deployment sites when we look for these stakeholders to participate. And here's when I emphasize it was very difficult in the beginning to select people and invite them to participate, even with free resources, like giving the devices, giving the technology. First, because there is no trust. Second, because there is no confidence in the technology. And third one, because they don't know the project at all. It's a research project, innovation project. The citizen science came to be more realistic in the sense that we produce the technology and we engage and inform them what exactly this is about and the objectives, the process that I explained before. We create this objective and plan, and then we engage with them to convince them that there is value on their contribution towards the community. to create impact rather than just the benefits towards an industry or towards a specific product manufacturer. And here is more like as a legacy, which is kind of the impact that we have in the city inside. This is the kind of the way to differentiate a traditional approach when we have the stakeholders already convinced or engaged, when we don't to the other approach, which is cities inside, when we don't have them and we have to approach them and convince them to be part of this initiative. Yeah.
Maybe may I just one super quick that okay, we started with the idea they are also the tester, the people, but here they are not the guinea pig of this technology, because at the end they are the real user. It's not only the feedback, but we did everything to improve their life. It's something that later is going to be scale put in commerce or stand in the city for the people. So they are really using, and the caregiver is using to monitor, to help the families, the elderly. So it's not that they are simply a test case, but they are really using in teaching and learn and using the system to improve their life. It's a real factor. It's put in practice. Real application. It's for them. It's not for the system.
Thank you very much, Achille, for that explanation. And thank you both for very informative and talk and looking at technology and design from an IoT perspective and infrastructure perspective as well. With that, I'm going to ask to transition to our next speaker and starting a new part 2 of this workshop around designing a citizen science project and exploring technology design and implementation. The first speaker is Jessie Oliver, a PhD student at Queensland University of Technology, almost my neighbor. I'm in Melbourne. And also Jessie is a liaison of the international liaison of the Australian Citizen Science Association. With that, I'm very pleased to hand over to Jessie. And again, if you can continue to write your questions in the chat, we will transition from Jessie to the next speaker, Philipp, and we'll have all the questions at the end. And Jessie, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are encouraging people to also take snapshots of your slides. So
if they would like to, yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jessie.
All right, so I am very excited to be able to share with you guys all the crazy stuff I've been up to these last couple years and a very rapid fire presentation around designing for citizen science and acoustics. And I'm going to kick off by starting with acknowledgement, since this is a joint talk. And I have an incredible team of people that I work with in conservation species recovery with a lot of different stakeholders, and I work with these sneaky little birds called eastern bristlebirds, and there's a captive population at the Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary, and there's some really awesome NGOs like Healthy Land and Water that help me put sensors in their really cryptic wild habitats where they hide in the grasses. And I've also received funding from the following organizations that I'm eternally ingrateful for. And when we look at technology design and what it influences in citizen science, it determines who can participate. It also determines where people can participate from, as well as how and when. So this is pretty basic stuff, but these are all really important considerations when you're designing and planning and thinking about motivations of your different stakeholders. In addition to that, decisions when designing the technologies also relate to the type of devices that you're going to use. In this instance, we're talking about acoustic sensing. So that is an acoustic sensor, records audio in the wild of our sneaky little beast bristlebirds. And tasks. So what are you going to actually have people doing? Are you going to have them looking for birds in the wild, identifying them, adding them in an app, or are you going to have them doing other things? They're also going to be thinking about the visible interfaces that people are going to need, whether they're on a website or if they're on an app or not. And that is actually very complicated in some circumstances, particularly in the case of audio. And they also need to think about, of course, the invisible infrastructures. And that refers to things, not just the infrastructure that most people think of, which is data infrastructure, but you also need to think about the invisible political and human infrastructures that influence how work is allowed to be done. And that actually really influences not only your technology, but just every other aspect of how people can cooperatively work in a project and what types of influences they can have on the outcomes. So, when designing interactive systems, I'm going to use a simple framework referred to as the PAC framework as one example of many. Jenny talked about participatory design, and there's lots of others. I've used multiple in my own research, and I would refer you to my papers if you'd like some other examples. But just as a general concept for those that are new to design, the PAC framework looks first and foremost at the people and what are their activities in context. So, not just what you want them to do as a scientist, but what are they already doing? And then, how can technologies actually augment what humans are already doing? What things are they already using tech for? How are they using that? And then, what things are they not doing with tech that tech might be able to help? And tech isn't always the solution, but this can help you to parse that information. And then you think about what requirements would be needed for the technologies. Then thinking about, okay, so what opportunities can the technology then afford? And the technology, as you will see, gaining experience in tech design, can actually create new opportunities all the time. And so then we do what's called iterative design, where we go and we reevaluate all of these things again, because the technology might actually create new contexts and new activities within that context. And then you need to reevaluate how things are growing. So, I'm going to just share some lessons from design tech for citizen science relating to this sneaky little beast. And just to give you a tiny bit of context about the bird, it's a critically endangered species in the area that I live in. It's only got 3 remaining populations, and the population near me, the northern population that I worked with the eastern bristlebird species recovery team, only has about 20 birds tops that we know of. So we needed to understand, or I needed to understand, and my collaborators and supervisors, what are the conservationists' habits? What are they already doing? How are they creating their conservation collaborative work way before acoustic sensing? But then I brought along my sensors and I pitched this idea. How do you think this might be able to help you, this whole sensing business? And they were game to try it because they're an incredibly innovative group, constantly looking for new ways. And I also looked then at birder knowledge because birders, I thought, and mistakenly, I'll get to that later, but I thought they would be my core group of people that already had knowledge of birdsong and might be interested in learning more about birdsong through looking through acoustic data. But I looked at what their knowledge was to also inform technology. Then I looked at citizen science interpretations, and when I say citizen scientists, I mean non experts, so non birders, non conservationists, to look at interpretations of media as well as birders. And then I tried to think about, okay, learning everything that I did, how can we create fun and informative interactions? Because at the end of the day, if you have fun, you can engage people. And if your interactions are informative, you can inform science, which then can inform support of conservation of our little bristlebird. So, I'm going to give you a quick and dirty overview of each one. And I attended a lot of meetings doing ethnographic work to understand practices and looked at the different ways, like this beautiful detector dog, that they use to sniff out the smells of eastern bristlebirds and indicate where they are. And then on my birthday, one of my colleagues went out and showed me a wild bristlebird, which was very exciting for me as a bird nerd. But this also shows their habitat. So they do this incredible amount of field work in very rugged habitat with very, very thick grasses. So they do a lot of surveys to find these types of nests that are buried in those grasses. But they also captively breed the birds to try and save the species through genetic rescue. And they love the idea of the sensing, so we first deployed them at Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary where those birds are being bred to understand what do we know about bird song. What did we learn from that? Well, we learned that they are just so close to dropping off the perch. I just want to save them around was pretty much the ubiquitous broad term goal But all of these different stakeholders, they're doing all these different activities. No one person was doing all of this. They all had very different goals that united them together across this one broad goal. So, thinking about how that technology can shape their interactions is really important. So, discerning those goals and motivations was lesson number one for conservation support. Then I looked at what do they actually know about bristlebird calls when we're talking with the birders or the conservationists themselves, and the knowledge of the birders is quite limited to one person that knows their call in the wild, who was able to look through my data. And you can see here he made some really neat little shorthand writings of the descriptions, but for one of them, he said it was a contact call of a male, and the other one was an advertisement. This was me giving him pieces of paper and playing the calls. I annotated over 3,000 myself and then picked 100 that were quite different to have him tell me whether I was correct or not. Did I find a bristlebird or not in that captive bird data? And then I spent a lot of time at the sanctuaries, and one lady there never had time for interviewing, but I spent a lot of time with her and I took a lot of observational notes. And what I learned is she had an incredible amount of knowledge. She even quizzed me if I could tell which individual bird was calling, and no, I couldn't. But I also had the team trying to review the data through a system that we had that admittedly doesn't have the easiest to use interface, but it's designed for ecologists that are very dedicated to navigating complexities to try and find what they could. But we discovered a lot of barriers through that process. And what I learned was we need new ways to improve skills and knowledge for both the people that are already knowledgeable but want to learn more and people that don't. We need to facilitate information exchange. So there were a lot of people on the team that wanted to learn, but these birds only call in September when they're breeding for the most part, most abundantly. So it's pretty limited. You have to be able to go to that rugged habitat in that very short period of time. We also want to extend far beyond the team because these guys are incredibly busy and they really don't have time to be looking through this data and thinking around how can we engage with usable and impactful types of interactions. So then I went to my birders and I discovered that I needed to know what their knowledge was because I needed to understand whether we could design for them. And I used a technological probe. So these are some really fancy, what are called spectrograms. They're visualizations of sound that are very compressed. So each one of those blocks that you're seeing represents 8 hours of time. Now, I didn't actually care about the accuracy of how people interpreted information in here because that didn't really matter to me. What mattered to me is what information I could learn from them exploring this data. And I'll only give one of my themes, but I refer you to my papers if you're interested in this type of work. So when we look at this particular call, people are fascinated to know what is that mysterious little green blob. And then I would show them the standard spectrogram, uncompressed, and ask them if they could tell me what it was. And they wouldn't be able to tell me what it was until I could give them context. And if you guys could talk back, I would ask you, but you can't really probably hear it. So it goes boo book, boo book, boo book, and the Australians in the crowd will know that that is a beautiful boo book owl. So what we learned from that is that this type of elicitation that I used, this format that I took to do design research, really told me that memories reflect a lot of knowledge. They shared so many stories, and I'm a birder, and I know we all like to talk about what birds we saw. But these visualizations also were really useful for eliciting and exciting and engaging birders in the different aspects of acoustics. They were really excited to see what they could learn, and they would often spot, scrutinize, and solve ambiguities as soon as I was able to give them context. So, with that boo book, for example, I said the other day to a group of birders, well, can you tell me what this little green blob is? And they said no. But when I said this was recorded in the Brisbane area at night, they go, oh, that's a boo book. And they just need that little bit of extra context. They really craved corroboration. They wanted to know what was on eBird and what area the recordings were from, and they wanted clarification about what the visualization colors represented. And it's important to realize that those colors actually are based on the entire acoustic energy of a soundscape. So, what sounds are happening in every second. So, it's not necessarily indicative of a particular species. And they gained a lot of insights about about the birds themselves. So there's this myth that all birds call more at dawn chorus, and that's not always the case. Parrots actually call much louder in the evening, which was actually visible in some of the visualizations that I showed. So citizen science interpretations of media was my next study, and I showed people these spectrograms, and I asked them, can you tell me what birds make these calls? And as you might imagine, they'd be like, most people would be like, no. Occasionally people could, though. And I'm going to do a terribly dreadful job of mimicking these calls for you because the audio is not working on this platform. So that one goes, rat, rat. The next one goes, oh, see, I can't whistle. It goes, doo, doot. Okay. And then the last one goes, doo, doot, much quieter. So if you're curious, there are these three birds, but could you match them up? I don't know. Then I would provide them also with maps to see how do they make sense of all this information and what is useful for that. And the lessons that I learned for that were incredibly invaluable. So interpreting spectrograms in and of themselves was actually really challenging, whether they were a birder or a novice. And a lot of people didn't know the variables, so frequency over time. And they might interpret it in creative ways, which really got my brain thinking. One person said it looked like car tracks, which I thought, whoa, metaphorical naming, that's a cool idea. This is actually a sulfur-crested cockatoo, and they make a variety of calls. So a lot of my participants would think of calls that I didn't supply, and that would confuse them. But then they might see this call and think of that as a single call of a cockatoo. But instead, that's an eastern whitbird for those playing at home. And some birders, when they saw the picture of the whitbird, they wanted to know, are you giving me just the male call that just goes doo doo, or are you giving me the male and the female call, because they call immediately after the male? So the male will go doo doo, and then the female goes choo choo. And so I was going to play them for you. Sorry, I can't. Be creative with my sounds. So, what we also found is the fact that when we give to people mixed types of media, it really did help them. One person even knew bristlebird purely by its distribution, but they didn't necessarily know it before they saw the distribution map. They thought it was a grassbird before then. So, we also found that people collaborated really well to discover new things. So, what we learned from this study overall in terms of citizen science lessons is there's a real need to understand how to bridge knowledge and context. And I gave a lot of explanation for how that might be able to be done. But also, facilitating long term engagement is really important. And we don't think about that enough with really complex tasks like audio, making sense of audio, right? So it's not an easy case for something like a classification situation online. So then that led me to my next explorations, and I created a prototype called the Bristle Whistle Challenge, and it includes a whole bunch of gameful and playful design attributes, as well as a conversational agent that I named Bob the Bristlebird, a little guy that'll pop up and give hints and guidance. And I also had people doing gameful interactions of matching, but I also had them doing playful things too, and they would match soundscapes of sound, but they would also match individual calls. And before I even did that, I really thought about that guy that annotated the car track or gave the car track idea. And I thought, it's kind of like Rorschach, right? So I chucked on some spectrograms online and I thought, okay, let's see what people do with them. And I chucked this little guy online, and a bunch of people really engaged with it and took the time to download it and draw on it and repost it when I asked them, if you think of Rorschach ink blot tests, what do you think of when you see this call? What is your perception of it in a creative, metaphorical way? This person thought it looked like an emu. And this person, by contrast, thought it looked like a swimmer. Other people posted JPEGs and GIFs and things like that. So it was very exciting. And so, what we need to emphasize in citizen science more often, while ecologists and scientists all think about what can the outcome be to be a strong scientific attribute, doing creative things can be incredibly memorable and really powerful to people. So, when they named the different calls, they would then use those names to create a language for them to be able to make sense of audio. And it builds a lot of context if you also provide some training about what birds are making which sounds with really mixed sensory experiences. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague.
Wow, Jessie, that was wonderful. Everybody in the audience was saying they could hear you, but I think it was nice actually having you also try out the calls because that's a
You could hear them. Oops, I interrupted my own calls. Anyway, great.
it was a great talk, and looking forward now to your colleagues' talk. So please keep those questions coming through the chat so we can have them at the end. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jessie's colleague and collaborator, Philipp Hummer, who some of you may know as the founder and designer of Spotteron. So, Philipp, over to you.
Thank you very much. In this second part, we look a little bit on how to implement technology and building apps for citizen science. So to get a general basis, apps and applications online, they have common needs. They need to work on many devices, operating systems. There are different browser versions, and especially in the mobile world, there are many different types of devices, Android, iOS, different system operating versions, etc., etc. So to have a stable environment for citizen science apps, it's quite necessary to update apps all the time and roll out improvements. This changing environment, we know it all by heart. There are always new versions, new updates, and new phones coming out, etc. So this is very important for the compatibility on one hand, also when a project grows. It gets bigger and it has more performance issues, etc. It's also important for the security and the privacy and the stability of citizen science apps. So in a general saying, apps are never done. So, but we on this platform, we always think about the citizens and the users also, because we are citizen scientists ourselves and participate in many projects. So when considering users, we created here for this presentation these two persons. On one hand, Jane, and on the other hand, John. And Jane is very active in social media platforms, for example. She stays up to date in her apps, and she loves to interact with other people. John, on the other hand, blogs about his garden on his personal blog. He uses messenger apps daily, and he loves hiking and uses map apps. So these are general needs we have when considering these traits of person using smartphone apps. So when we translate that to citizen scientists, to citizen science apps, and just as an example, for the social connection, Jane wants to share her contributions online. For staying up to date, she needs to have a community news feed and gets notifications by the citizen science app. And for exchange, she needs to comment and have possibilities for user interaction or with interaction with the project itself. For John, with his own personal blog, he loves to, for example, create a map with his own personal data. While he uses messenger apps on a daily basis, he's very used to put in emojis. And this is also a feature of citizen science apps, which can be important for motivation. And also when being on a hike or being outdoors, the offline mode and the map area download is an important thing because you don't have always an internet connection there. So when considering this, what we do on Spotteron is a modular platform approach, and these features are kind of puzzle pieces for citizen science apps. This means features come together and create a common greater picture. It starts from the login, it goes over to contributing data in a questionnaire, it goes to the offline mode, commenting, etc., etc. In general speaking, in a few of technologies, these puzzle parts, these tiny pieces can be shared between projects in a common digital environment. And this is in general how a platform of citizen science works. We call this the feature ecosystem, where one project, for example, funds an extension, a new feature, and then all other projects get that without extra development costs. So for the second, or for a better view of this, we prepared a little bit of a live hands-on part. I hope that works actually. If you want to follow along or take a look at what we show later, here are 3 apps I selected running on the platform. It's on one hand Groundwater for hydrology and water observations. There's Nature's Calendar. It's about phenology, climate change research, and general nature spotting. And there is the German project Land auf, Land ab. It's about history and local heritage. And I will show you just in a second or in a minute. And below there is a login if you want to if you don't want to register. So one example I would like to share and want to show is the spot update feature. This enables chronological timelines in citizen science apps. So we often have this need for this feature in different kind of projects when users can create existing observations, but they can add additional attributes or additional observations to the same object or to the same location. So this feature was funded by Nature's Calendar, and it's used in phenology to update phenological phases, for example, of the apple tree in your garden. And it's also then, it has been adopted by other projects in different approaches, which I wanted to show to you. So I hope that works actually. We are here running real Android devices on a virtual machine on our workstation. And these are real smartphones. They're just running on a computer here. And on the left side, you can see Nature's Calendar, and then Groundwater, and then Land auf, Land ab, which is kind of difficult to pronounce. So when I take a look here at the feature we just did look at, the spot update feature, I just go to my personal profile because I'm also active in the Citizen Science app. And here you can see, for example, what I mentioned before with Jane. She likes to stay up to date. So there's a news feed with the people I am connected with in the app, and I see their activities, comments, and likes. But I go now to the spot section here of my own personal spots, and I jump over to this beautiful tree, which is just around the corner of our office. And it's a Kugeltrompetenbaum. I don't know what the English species name is for that. What I do, I go by almost every week or every 2 weeks, and then I snap a photo of it. And here you can see how the spot update feature is important for phenology. So you see the phases of the tree from winter to spring to summer, and you can see how the leaves grow, and you can see how it changes over time. In Groundwater, which is about hydrology, it's a different approach. They use the same feature, and I filter here just for the spots with many updates. So they use the same feature, for example, this spot, and it zooms in now. So the first user puts in a virtual scale on a map, and then other users can update it with their own measurements. And what they create are, again, these measurement timelines. But here, because it's about numeric values, we can also create statistics out of it. For example, here, a water level. It's the same feature with an attachment. And on the third example, here is Land auf, Land ab. As said before, it's about cultural heritage. And I filter again just for the main spots which they put up. They use the feature in a very different way. They created spots when launching the project with historical photographs and made a whole contest out of it, and inviting users to take the same picture in current time. And they blogged about it. They had this wonderful screens where you can move a slider in between and see the two different stages. And it was a very successful approach to that. So what we see here is that one feature developed for one project does not need to be just for the one project. You don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. And also from a user's perspective, that's very important because by creating such an approach, then you can collaboratively create new features over time and extend the current citizen science apps with new functionalities and new parts of it. There are many examples here, what we do on our platform. Here, for example, are leaderboards, or there are statistics about the data which has been contributed by the users. And also, for example, there are timelines available for which is more visually, for sure, in species-related apps, in monitoring, or here in phenology related citizen science, where you can see how different species and their phases are distributed over a year, for example. So to jump a little bit back here, in general, I need to go back to the presentation. Yeah, that should work now again. From our point of view and our experience, also as citizen scientists, it would be so cool that if citizen science can reach out very broadly. And by that, it can have a really big impact, not only about data collection, but also in immersement and engaging people on a general basis. It can create communities, topic-related communities, where people of the same interest can come together, exchange via, for example, a communication feature, like a commenting function or a social approach inside the apps. And by that, it can really be a part of our lives. So technologies, by implementing that matters how people can also start on with citizen science. If they are feeling welcome and if they are a part of something bigger and not alone in just the app. So it matters also, I think, for the impact of citizen science on a broader scale, if there's the possibility to engage people on such a deeper basis. Okay, thank you very much. I hope that was not too quick, and I don't know what the time actually is because I didn't have the timer on, but there are questions, and filling in the time with questions is also always a good approach.
Thank you, Philipp. We'll probably invite Jessie as well to come in because there's a number of questions for both of you. And what's great about this whole workshop is from IoT and urban sort of settings to natural infrastructures and platform design. We have it all. So I think there's some preliminary questions that came to you, Jessie. For instance, can you share your reference to your papers?
Yes, I will do that. If
And
you guys can hang into the chat for a minute, I'll just send you my ORCID ID. That's probably the easiest way to find them. But I did see that other people, my stuff is on ResearchGate if you use that. And I tweet like a madwoman. So that's another way to find them.
wonderful. Now you've had a bit of a following, I think, after your bird calls. So you're going to have quite a few compliments, I think, coming through the chat. But we have
Hilarious.
one question about lockdown and how many birders in the UK got into recording nocturnal migration calls of birds. So some got really into detective work about, you know, what was that sound, and you can see it on this URL nocmig.com, knockmig.com. So that's
Cool. I've copied that down. Thank you, Michael.
And another question: how do you see this work progressing for the next PhD student?
Well, they're not going to run with my work. I got plans for it. No, I need somebody to give me a giant bucket load of money so I can keep doing this rad research. But, you know, no, what I'd like to do and what I have already started, actually, my final study is the one that I only just gave you guys a teaser of with the creativity with calls and gamification and playfulness and all that stuff. I'm in the thick of writing that right now. In fact, I'm going to try to submit it next week. So I should be writing, but you know, I love you guys. I had to be here. So, yeah, what I'd really like to do, I did a qualitative study around some of that stuff, and I would really like to continue exploring how to actually implement it in an interaction sense. So prototyping online and things like that. And I really want to help these bloody birds. I don't want it to just be designed for design's sake. So for me, being able to then extend that to scalable stuff would be the most amazing thing ever, but I need to find support to do that, which is very tricky. So we'll see.
Just following from that, Jessie, so there was a question also about a formal study maybe on the use of those metaphors. So you had, for instance, those soundscapes looking like different animals, like an emu, a call looking like an emu, for instance. Is that something you're thinking about?
Yeah, so the Rorschach idea that I came up with, I also did, and I didn't even mention it, but I did acoustic interpretation in a Rorschach-ian sense, if you will. And people needed examples of how birders already do that, so I gave them mnemonic devices that birders frequently use and elicited creativity that way. And it was super powerful, and I've never seen it done with audio. And a lot of people collect audio in projects like Frog ID in Australia that are quite successful, but in terms of analysis relative to camera trap image classification, the projects have fairly low participation, which isn't necessarily bad too. I just want to emphasize, but if you're trying to save a threatened species and the only solid way to find it is sound, then time is of the essence. So I want to see how we can figure out speeding this process up and getting people excited about a little brown bird. I mean, I picked it because I love it, and I've been involved with BirdLife Australia for a long time, but I'm weird like that.
Well, one of the other questions is actually also about imitating bird sounds, if I got it right. So I was wondering whether giving community members the clue on the home range of the birds does not bias them. So you've got another follow-up question on that about any tendency for people to be biased in their misidentifications of similar sounding species.
Probably, and that's something that we should definitely tease apart. And I just want to emphasize too, a lot of people ask me, why don't you just do a Shazam for birds and just cut the people out of it? But even camera trap images are really hard to do that with. You can, depending on things, but sound is so much more difficult for so many different reasons. And I won't get into that now, but still, even if we can use AI to narrow down how much data has to be reviewed, then if we could put what's left in a really fun, creative way, that's not just really boring looking at spectrograms. I've done it for like a year now. It's really boring, but we can make it fun. It doesn't have to be. So that's kind of my goal. And I think that, yeah, there's lots of ways to do that I'm writing up right now. But it's a
And a
learning process. I think often in citizen science, sorry, we don't actually design for learning very often. It's and you asked about biasing data. It's about getting people excited about learning about birds first. So giving them the distribution maps actually got the novices the most excited because they'd never seen them before. And then scaffolding the way that you introduce them to things so they can learn.
That's great, Jessie. Thank you. So, question for Philipp. Philipp, there was a question about is an API also part of the feature ecosystem?
Yes, it is. So we have API we provide an API for projects, and we also maintain that, which is kind of important if you have a platform and extend that all the time. And sometimes, for example, like in Crowdwater, it started with 3 categories and 3 observation options, and now I think there are 6. So this is also a part which we take care of, and there is the API to be used. And it's used, for example, in Crowdwater with on our website, crowdwater.ch. And they have a statistics tool there, which is have built by them on basis of the API, for example. But it's also used for automatic data exchange.
Great. Jessie, you can just put your mute on for a second.
Sorry.
It's okay. So, Philipp, another question. Wondering, this audience member was wondering if Spotteron is based on OpenStreetMaps or Google Maps. Is there any dependency on using the cartography?
This is a very good question because it taps also into user privacy. When you use free services, free on the internet, then you'll normally pay with your participants' data. And that is something we don't do on Spotron. We have this digital ethics that we don't want to give personal data away to big mega corporations. So the data or the map data in general is based on OpenStreetMap, but we run our own map servers for that too. Because on OpenStreetMap, on one hand, it's not like you can just use it for free in general. They tolerate that usage, but up to a level. And on the second hand, it's not able, for example, to provide map download functionality with implementing OpenStreetMap in a citizen science app. So in this case, we run our own map servers, but with these providers like Mapbox, MapTiler, etc. All the map data is based on OpenStreetMap, but rendered on own servers with own styles.
That's great, Philipp. Thank you. And you've got another question about are you able to monitor which features are most popular with users?
No, because we don't track users. We have no Google Analytics inside the smartphone apps, or mobile analytics as it's called. We do not track, we don't know where they click, where they are, we don't monitor this, just because to protect the personal data and the privacy of users. I think that's very important to consider when running citizen science apps. It's not like a next social media channel with advertising. It's citizen science, and in my personal opinion at least, and as a citizen scientist, it should have this ethics. And we don't track the users, but there is for sure adoption rates visible when there are features for data contribution. So when, for example, a project launches a new feature like now CoastSnap for AI analysis of taking photographs of beaches to analyze coastal resilience, then you can see if the users use the feature in the data. and also the amount of contributions you can measure by just looking at the amount of contributions in the app, or the amount of participation, sorry.
That's great, Philip. There was another question related, not dissimilar, about including data from external APIs. Can you also include data from external APIs?
Yeah, we do that in a prototype now. This is not yet live. For example, in one project about climate watching, it's called Climate Watch. We are implementing data from OpenSenseMap. So OpenSenseMap are these, I'm sure you know it is the sense boxes which you can build by yourself at home, do-it-yourself sensoring, and all the OpenSenseMap boxes go onto OpenSenseMap.org, and they have an API which we integrate as data points also in the app and match that with contributions. On the second view, we are part of a research project about implementing satellite data from the Sentinel satellites directly as visualizations in the applications, and there's the upcoming data visualization overlay, as we call it. So these parts are all based on external APIs, and it's quite flexible. With an API, you can do so many things.
Thanks, Philip. So there's now a question for both of you about, in your experience, what technological features are better for creating communities? For example, a forum or a one-to-one chat.
I'm going to say that it really depends on your community.
Yeah.
So, like I was saying before, I always look at the practices of the community. If I try to do something like Twitter with my birders, they don't use Twitter. It's not going to work, right? Some of them use Facebook, but only certain ones. So, you really have to dive into understanding the practices of your community, I think.
Yeah, to tap in there are so many types of communities. Like on one hand, there is social media for sure, with a little bit this drawback of user monetization for sure, etc. But the question for me is always, where should the community be? If the community should be within your own toolkit, within your smartphone apps, citizen science apps, or on your homepage, there are so many common practices. If as a user, what do I need to have in a community as features? It's very simple in general. I need to be able to participate. So that means I need to be able to comment or to create posts. The second thing is what fosters communities is interaction. So this is why from Twitter to Facebook to anywhere, and also on Spotrun, there is a feature where you can just simply with one tap like stuff. This is called normally an appreciation button. So you give a quick appreciation, and this creates frequency and activity. So the main, what is called the main trap is building a community which is not active. So when you, for example, launch a forum on your own website, which is a very easy way to do on open source content management systems, then you need also to maintain that activity. My best advice is be active as a project. So reply, post, share, and this is within your own community, within either the forum, the smartphone apps, if they have community features implemented, or somewhere else.
Yeah, I want to echo the feedback part of it is so important. Enabling people to have some sort of feedback with the people that are running the project. And the project managers really should take the time to do that, because it really will increase capacity of your project.
Great. So we have about a minute or so for questions, and so this is addressed to Philip. What are the main approaches or methodologies that you use for designing the apps or deciding the new features? How deep are involved the users in that process?
Oh, that's a very good question. The process goes in general like that. We don't decide what features are inside the apps. We advise the project. Every project comes to us and says, hey, we need a citizen science app, and some of them have a development budget. So we can create new features for that development budget. The first step is by our, I need to calculate and I feel old now, by our 15, 20 years of experience we have now in design and online media, we advise for sure and work together in a co-created process with the project itself. If they are satisfied, if they are happy about the concept, then we build the feature. And this feature, again, is shared among all other projects, and they can adopt it freely. So in the design approach, what we do, it really depends on what kind of feature it is for sure and how big it is. For small features, which are, for example, just on a technical level, you don't need a methodology, or you don't need, let's put it better in that way, you don't need to do inquiries about that because it's clear what you do. Like, for example, building a sharing button which users can share stuff on online media. But on the other hand, there are projects where we create different use different approaches, like, for example, archetyping. I hope this is spelled correctly in English, where you create user archetypes and attach what we did actually before in the presentation a little bit, create user archetypes, go through their mindset, have a different view on that. We also do, for bigger features, sometimes A/B testing, which is very helpful to create two versions of it. It's more content related mostly, because creating technical features, it takes time. There are many work hours put into that. So it really depends on how big the things are.
Thanks very much, Philipp. Thank you, Jessie. Both fantastic presentations, and thank you to Martin and Achille as well. Those questions that haven't been answered, they will be provided to the speakers to respond to, and some of the contact details I think have already been provided. I want to thank you, all the attendees, for the terrific questions, and now you have the opportunity to transition to a Pilates session at 11:30. But once again, I hope you give a virtual clap to our wonderful presenters today.
Thank you
And a
very
very exciting session. Thank you.
Thank you, Anja.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Well, I'll be in the Zoom if anybody wants to ask questions, chatting.
Yeah. Good
Great.
point.
Thank
or you can sing
thank
out
you,
on
everyone.
Twitter. Thank you.
Bye.